is going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, a super serious, only the most serious business show for only the most serious business people. And obviously, I've got my most serious business partner here, Austin Lynch. Austin, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm feeling good. It's Friday. It's casual Friday. I got my t-shirt on, and we got our good friend Zack in the studio today. So it's hard to be having a bad day with this going on.
Yeah, that's a good point. We are sharing The Highlight again today with a longtime friend of ours, Zack Estes. Zack, how you doing, man?
Lovely. Having a wonderful Friday. It's a cold morning here in Tennessee.
I was about to say, they got you kicked into the office garage there, so it looks like we got to get you some insulation, maybe one of those outdoor heaters or something like that.
Oh,
so
yeah, it's cranked.
Yeah, we got to get you another one or something, man. So I obviously know who you are. We've been friends a long time. But why don't you take a minute and just sort of give everybody the high-level overview of Zack Estes, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Zack Estes. I'm the COO of a company called Path for Growth. Really, our whole shtick is that we have one-on-one coaching for business leaders, business owners who are interested in practicing healthy growth, because you can be growing, but then that doesn't mean you're alive. Growth for the sake of growth is dead, and we just don't believe in that. We want people to experience freedom. We want people to experience growth without the growth of their stress. So that's what we're doing over here at Path for Growth.
That's awesome. When you talk about healthy growth, like, can you unpack that for just a minute? Because I know, and we've talked about this a lot, but when I first started a business, my ego told me I should open 1,000 of these barbecue restaurants. And I never even stopped for a second to consider the cost of that. We just had another guest on, and we got into this sort of like, what do you actually want out of a business? So I love Path for Growth model around healthy growth, but I'd love for you to just sort of unpack that for a second if you could.
Yeah. So you just said something that is almost a basis or like fundamental question is, what do you want? And I think a lot of people don't address that question. And so they'll start with just saying, I want more money. Or maybe I want more time. Maybe they even go down the road of I want more time, and then they get more money, but then they lose all their time. It's so funny how that works. But healthy growth is really just defining, one, do you want to be healthy? A lot of people either will avoid that question or just won't answer that question because they want growth. Growth is really fun and energetic and provides dopamine. We're super pro growth, but we're also just not at the cost, like you said, at the cost of everything else, at the cost of your marriage, at the cost of your relationships, at the cost of your time and energy. And so just trying to build the boundaries and guardrails for your business that you likely own, or at least lead and have influence in, so that you can grow and build a good environment for yourself and your team and your customers, but also for your family.
Yeah.
So I've got a question about that. So, I think it's really easy to say, like for myself, obviously what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I know that all three of us are kind of in an interesting bucket. We all have a kid around 1 year old. And so, like we all have families, we all have marriages to take care of, but we also all have businesses. So what do you say to kind of the entrepreneur that has the healthy growth mindset? He really values that, but on the other side, they have really kind of wild ambitions and want to get to 1,000 stores. What do you say to that person?
Yeah. I mean, you have to choose, and you can't do everything. And so that's like, if you're going to be realistic, it's better to be specific about what you are going to focus on, and be specific about what you are not going to focus on. And so that way you can just be diligent about pursuing a direction rather than going left, going right, going left or going right. Just go straight and go right at what you want to accomplish. But labeling exactly what it is that you do want and seeing, is there anything that's conflicting? You can't spend 24 hours a day with your family and 24 hours a day at work. So it's just like,
right.
Okay, well, so we have to choose something, and making those decisions. And it's hard decisions, but once you label them, write them down, and commit it to a standard and make a commitment, not of perfection, but of commitment. There's a standard of commitment that you're saying, here's what I'm coming to every single day. I don't have to hit 1,000 for 1,000, but I'm going to come back to this every single morning and say, here's what winning looks like for today.
So you're making decisions as an entrepreneur. You have to make critical decisions to kind of like you said, aim yourself in one path. What are some of those decisions? Is it, I'm going to start working at 7 and stop at 4 no matter what happens every day? Are those the type of decisions that you're kind of working with your clients at Path for Growth on? Or is it more broad than that and not so kind of hard and fast?
Yeah, it goes back to the question, what do you want? So in Path for Growth, we teach our clients to use a tool that we call success statements. And really, it's just the answer to the question, what do you want? What does winning look like? And get really specific with that. Get as specific as is helpful. What we find is someone will define something, and then over time they'll say, okay, well, that's true. That statement that I have as a standard for myself of what winning looks like is true, but I feel somewhere deep down that I'm not where I want to be. And so it's time to update the standard. It's time to improve the standard and get more specific about what you do want. That's what we often find. So the biggest question is answering what do you want. We do that for a lot of things. You can do that for your role, for where you want to take your business. So as a CEO, as a COO, as a leader, what are the things that the results that you want out of that role? What do you want that person to be responsible for? You can answer that with where are you going? Like, what do you want to be true in 3 years? And then you can kind of give yourself a direction of saying, okay, is this not true? Is this inconsistently true? Is this consistently true? That's kind of our red, yellow, green method that we use in Path for Growth. But then you can also do it for processes. You can do it for meetings. You can do it for anything really in life. You can do it for, what do I want my relationship with my wife to look like? What does that rhythm look like for us and our family? Maybe it's we go to church every week. Is that consistently true? Is that inconsistently true, or is that not true? And you like, if that's something that you want because you want a community of like-minded folks, then that's something that you're going to prioritize and say, okay, we have the standard. Let's evaluate our execution of the standard, and gauge whether or not we need to make adjustments.
Yeah, it's interesting. The idea around growing is often it often comes from a good place. Like, the person wants to impact the world in a positive way. They want to. You would have started your business if you didn't think you could make a positive impact on the economy, on your local environment, whatever it is. But what ends up happening, and where you and I get into the deepest conversations, I think a lot of times, is around the person that wants to grow but outgrows their operations. And so, like, we all have the same sort of small business life cycle where when you're a startup, there are no systems, probably not really. And then all of a sudden you're just like growing like crazy. And so I'd love to know what you think about the small business owner and what they need to think about when it comes to systems and operations, and maybe even what they get wrong on their way to trying to grow healthily.
It's a huge question. That's a big open-ended question. I love it. Here's something that I've found people often get confused by. Whenever someone says operations, everyone has their own definition as to what that is and what that means. And so I'm gonna change it up a little bit and say, let's define what operations is. Operations, from my understanding and what I teach and what I practice, is that operations is the creation and delivery of value. That's it. It's the creation and delivery of value. So how does your business create value? 1, and 2, how does your business deliver that said created value? The reason that that's important is because then you can, once you have a standard for what is your value, how do you create it, and how do you deliver it, and everyone understands that that's true, it's really easy. Let's go to Chandler's barbecue past. It's really easy to see that a barbecue sandwich is the value that we're creating and we're delivering it. It's harder when it's a service-based business. It's harder to get your mind around, like, okay, what is someone wanting in this moment? What are they paying us for? But you want to be clear about what that is. You don't want to be guessing, because if you're not clear about what you're selling, if you're not clear about what value you're creating, your customer has no clue. That's a guarantee. And it may be that you're not actually giving them anything that they value. They may be coming for one thing, and you're giving them 9 other things that you're wasting your time on because it's not helpful for them. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. There's a little bit of a mindset with my manufacturing background of a standard product line, meaning you offer this product, it helps someone with some explained value and it solved a very specific problem, and you can crank those out. Or you're a little bit of a custom job shop where this customer that you're talking to, you're wanting to solve their specific problem, and so you need to deliver specific value. And that requires its own standard. That all of those different types of products are their own standard. So
its own unique price point as well, because you're talking about when you're looking at something that's highly operationalized. Go back to the restaurant background. McDonald's has a very specific high standard, and it's a very specific operating manual in those restaurants that produces the same product pretty much in every McDonald's, no matter where you're at. And it costs you $4 or $5. I mean, inflation's really hit the large fry price, which is a whole nother topic for another day. It's a gripe. The large drinks have gone way up, so it's not an easy stop anymore. But even McDonald's with their operational efficiency can't outrun the inflation. Anyways, so you have that lens, and it's an inexpensive meal to go out and eat, which is crazy when you think about it. But then you have the a place here that you love, I know, is Bourbon Steak in Nashville, and it's a very high-end experience. The menu is customized. It moves around a lot. It requires a higher level of individual artist inside the moment to actually make the thing happen. And so I think there is some nuance to knowing what kind of business you're actually in and then pricing yourself accordingly. And then that price and profit gives you the overhead to be able to go and actually build out the system that you need. Because even if it is a more customized job, you still are going to have some sort of system in there. I like the ratio example. So for like High Beam, we go, our systems, all of our standard operating procedures, we basically tell people, hey, this is going to get you 80% of the way there. And we expect you to follow it 80% of the way. Now, what we know is that, we're dealing with social media management for people. That's going to change on a daily basis. So if the operating procedure says post every day, no matter what, and then, there's a giant political thing that happens, like just read the news there, it's all the time. And like, are you really going to be the one selling your cheesecake or your protein supplements or whatever it is in the middle of a national crisis? Like, well, I remember when the Ukraine war popped off, we had this exact conversation where it was like, hey, we know we've agreed to this as an operating measure for excellence as a company, but nuance is needed in our job. And hey, there's a little bit of art that's applied here, so we're going to skip today. And so is it more of like, it's not a blanket thing across the board, is it? Or is it that everybody should go for 80%? What do you think?
I think the more that you can document and specify what winning looks like and what the standard is in regards to everything, the product, the process, everything, I think the better. You'll never actually accomplish completion there, though. So that's the other thing. The one thing I'll say, though, is that if you're not intentionally making an exception, you'll always make exceptions. And so the point there is like operate off of a standard. And when an exception is necessary, intentionally make that decision. If you don't operate off of a standard, you'll always make exceptions. And so you'll always do the work differently. There'll always be some different action that you need to take, and the result will always be variable.
That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah. Are you saying that you should have a system for making exceptions as well?
Is
that what I'm hearing?
For sure. Yeah. To at least give you a little bit of a road to run on. Give yourself a little bit of a guardrail and boundary for here's how we deviate from the standard.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, we work with businesses all the time, and we try to help them identify, their ICP, their ideal customer profile. And we do that for ourselves too. And, we have a pretty cut and clear, here's our ICP, here's what they look like demographically, psychographically, this is what they look like in terms of, an annual revenue. These are the things that they've been doing. These are the things they haven't been doing. But at the end of that, we always say there is exceptions. And so I find it fascinating that you're kind of saying we actually need a systematized way to go about looking at those exceptions and deciding, is this an exception that's worth making, or is it an exception that's going to kind of further spin the wheel of things, kind of getting out of control? So Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of unique point. But
Can I follow up on
Chandler, I
that?
think we need to get back to the whiteboard. Yeah, please do. Please do.
I was having a conversation with a customer recently, and it's about a 20 to 30 person size business. They're a high end interior design company out of New York City. Um, and we were talking through this idea of like ideal customer, like how do we have the standard process for every single project as a custom design that's new for that customer? How do we have kind of the standard process? And one of the things that was really, really important for them to understand was they can standardize the variables relative to all of their customers that they know, but every single one of their customers is going to have a different need. And so there's a little bit of it's the reason why it's a more expensive product is because they're making this investment of understanding who this specific customer is, and adjusting, so to speak, the standard before they go and execute for that need, for that customer specifically, because they are so high end and high touch points, things like that.
Yeah, but they still have a system there.
That's right. That's right. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. They're not starting from scratch every time.
I find in my experience talking to small business owners that especially lean heavier on the like artistic side of entrepreneurship, and they're not as worried about building big, massive, bureaucratic infrastructures with nothing but systems. And they will definitely stay in that lane of like, I'm a special snowflake. My business is unique. I don't actually have to have systems. I don't care what you say. Every job is unique. I have to be able to apply the thing. But I do think there is hey, it's even just like, we call leads back within 24 hours. Like that's the start of a system. That's a process. And
100%.
that's the same for everybody, no matter how big or small the job ends up being. And so there's even like, hey, we get bids back within 30 days most of the time. And we get like, there's still a way to do it. But I think, I don't know. I think people just come down to like, do you want to do it or not? And it's sort of a muscle that newer entrepreneurs, especially, or maybe undisciplined long-term entrepreneurs that just have this crazy business with high margin, they don't have to learn the lesson yet. And so they don't. And I would just implore them to please get everything written down, because it's the only way you can get some sanity.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that we teach at Path for Growth is kind of the 4 steps to operationalization. Big word there, operationalization. But the 4 steps are standardize, document, evaluate, improve. Standardize, document, evaluate, improve. The thing is that everyone has a standard in their mind. So your example of like, hey, we get back to leads within 24 hours. That's a standard. The problem is that communicated to the team? Like, how is that communicated to the team? And then all of those standards that you have in your head, how is your team going to know about that if it's not documented somewhere? And so to your point, the best, this will get you 80% of the way there, and that final 20% will get you what I think is like excellence. But the 80% is just document what you want to be true. Just document what you want the result to be, and then evaluate the execution associated with that. Did we accomplish that and produce the result that we wanted? If not, maybe we need to get more specific about how we accomplish that result.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll never forget that when we first started the barbecue restaurant, my mom was the art side of the thing. And we just had a really great partnership because we're family, which has its own unique challenges. But I was really more of the business and strategy and all that kind of side. And she was the artist, right? She loved to cook. She was really the chef that was driving everything. But we had a ton of discussions in the first like 6 months about, especially as we brought people in to help, just getting her to write recipes down, because she is a cook with touch and feel and love. And like, I can't tell you how many times I had the conversation with her, and probably I was younger. And so I probably didn't do it as well as I should have. It was probably a lot of like, just write it down and versus like leading and influencing. So I will say that. But she was always like a little pinch of this, a little pinch of that. And I'm like, your pinch is not replicatable. I know these potatoes are different sizes and the weights are slightly off. And so, but I'm like, we've got to get it down at least a little bit better. And she did, to her credit, eventually change. And we were able to actually grow and scale, but it was painful. I mean, and so I feel every artist that's out there that's saying like their business is their art. It may not be an actual painting or sculpture or something like that. Like, business to some people is their art. And I don't know, is it that they feel like it's less than now because it has a replicatable process behind it?
I've seen people have that hesitation for sure. I think people really feel that way when they think that whenever I document a process, all that they are doing is documenting the steps to accomplish the result. So instead, what I recommend people do is start with the result. Start with the result that you want, and that way you always are coming back to like, wait, why are we doing this step? Why are we doing this action? And then you don't lose what it is that we're actually trying to accomplish. So the hierarchy there is really what you want to be true, the result that you want to produce, and then secondarily follow the steps. One of the things that we do with our team members is we don't evaluate their execution of the process. We evaluate the result that they produced. And the reason for that is if they go in and say, okay, I'm following the process, but it's not going to lead to the result, then forget the process. Like accomplish the result the best way you know how, if the process isn't going to help you get there. And then we need to go back and fix the process so that we can reproduce the result as much as we can.
Yeah, I got triggered there for a second. I was like, well, wait, I do agree with the whole, like, the Japanese model of stop the production line to like fix the issue and all that. Like, and I would love for you to just, because you know it better than me, explain that. But yeah, there is a part of me that's like, hey, you also have to have the organizational discipline to go back and take the annoying time to actually fix and update the process so that this, back to your point of like exceptions always happen. That's not a system. That's lack of discipline.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what we teach, in the digital world of working on our laptops, for our team, at least, we are able to do that simultaneously. We can functionally stop what we're doing, update the standard, and continue executing to accomplish the result that we want. But to your point, what happens in manufacturing when the work is physical, you actually have to literally stop the production line and you say, okay, we're producing a defect here. How do we prevent ourselves from continuing to produce more defects? And how do we fix this defect right here? So go ahead, fix the defect, change the standard so that we don't keep producing defects, and then get the production back on pace.
I'd be remiss if I didn't, take the opportunity to bring up another example that Chandler frequently uses from his barbecue days. And Zach, the reason I cannot leave it out is because he spent, a good 5 minutes ragging on his mom's cooking ability. But what he didn't tell you is that for the longest time, he wouldn't let any of his employees, including his family members, talk to any of his customers because I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, Zach, the standard Chandler set was all up here. I don't think he communicated that. So Chandler, why don't you take a second and talk about how and when you actually took the moment to create the system. Tell us how that went. Tell us if there were flaws in the system. And then Zach, I would love you to grade Chandler's ability to create said system.
I appreciate my business partner holding my feet to the fire because I think that's what makes good partners, right? It's not just a yes men situation, but that's true. I mean, when we first started the barbecue restaurant, we were in a tent on the side of the road. So just setting the stage there for like how stupid I was for having this thought process. But I had gotten it in my head that if we had any bad customer experience, because I knew how powerful word of mouth and referrals were going to be for us, especially when we had no money and no budget, that I was basically going to be the one that held the line. I was going to talk to every customer because I knew I had to sell, even though my dad's been in recruiting for 20 years and my mom is awesome and lovely South Georgia woman who has hospitality coming out of her elbows, right? It's just, I just had it in my mind that if it wasn't me talking to the customer, that a mistake could happen. And of course, this lasted like maybe 3-4 months. Like everybody else on the team was fine with it because they just got to hang out in the back of the room and do whatever. And then I realized pretty quickly that like, oh, this means I'm never going to get a day off. This means that no one else is ever going to actually get good at this because they don't actually get to practice. And it also means that we're never actually going to scale beyond this tent on the side of the road. And so I had to have my own little heart-to-heart with myself and say, am I going to what do I actually want out of this business? Back to what Zach was saying earlier. I wish I knew Zach back then. I would have been able to save myself a lot of time. But it was like, what did I actually want out of the business? Was it I wanted to be the best cashier in Lexington, Kentucky, and that nobody would ever touch my ability to upsell a dessert? No, of course not. I wanted to build a really cool, big local barbecue restaurant. And eventually we got it out, and I started hiring people, and we let them run the thing, and they talked to customers. But we did end up putting a system in place And back to I think every position requires nuance, and you don't ever want to be legalistic about everything. And as much as Zach loves operations, I will tell you, you're really good about not being legalistic. And I think that's huge when it comes to putting procedures and stuff in place. It's the thing Austin and I talk about all the time is like, we basically set up a guardrail for, here's your rules when you're talking to a customer. You don't get to bankrupt the business and don't bankrupt the brand. So like, these are your two black and whites. Like, as long as you do things inside of there, we can coach it up. We can talk about it. We can do all the things. But if you cross one of those lines, then it's going to be out of pocket. And I did end up having a cashier that basically like cussed a customer out, and that's bankrupting the brand. And I still was I just wasn't as strong of a leader, back then. And so I took her into the back and I wanted to coach her up. And instead of holding the fast line that I had been telling everybody about for months, and I took her into the back and I like started to coach her up. And then she started it on me in front of all of the staff that was there. And so like, now we have more cultural issues coming out. And so, it was almost dangerous. And it was I was able to, luckily we were able to talk to the customer that had come in and get them righted. And there's all kind of things you can do there. But yeah, it was my worst nightmare came true. And that was 2 years into it. And the company lived another 4 years. And it wasn't that capsized us. It was my other stupid decisions. It was growing for the sake of growth. That's what took out the restaurant, Zach.
Yeah, for sure.
What's my grade?
Yeah, what do you think?
Oh, goodness. I don't know.
We still operate this business off of don't bankrupt the business, don't bankrupt the brand. So I hope that we're at least in like the B+ territory there, because otherwise we might really be in trouble.
The thing I would say, yeah, but I don't know. I don't want to give a grade. The thing I would say there is, if it's a true standard and you're holding yourself to that commitment, the cool thing is that you'll likely accomplish it, and you'll operate within it. It sounds like there's a lot of space between those two guardrails, which maybe that's exactly what y'all want, and so that's clear and that's awesome.
Yeah, I think
the question I would have is, are you producing variable results, and do you want to produce variable results? If those answers are yes and then no, then you change.
No, that's actually a really good call out, because what we actually do as a company is that we have, Austin and our ownership team have these black and white rules that everybody has to abide by, no matter what position you have inside of the company. It is like, if you do something that would in long term bankrupt the brand or bankrupt the company, like, we can't help you. If you're stealing from us, like, there's nothing I can do for you. Like, there's no coaching that up. And it's a values thing, really. These guardrails are really around values at the end of the day. But what happens is within those guardrails, there's different teams and different functions. And so if you have like, let's say we have a social media manager on our team, like, they have their own operations and systems, and they also operate within those guardrails of the company as a whole. But that specific team has their own unique operating procedure that helps us predictably get the same result over and over and over again. Austin, it reminds me of, we just had a situation with you guys on the paid team where one of our contractors had a different standard for, what was it? Was it a ROAS campaign, or was it what was that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was an e-commerce campaign, optimizing, to a target ROAS. Basically, the breakdown there was, first of all, she did a great job correcting, and I think, performance didn't go to hell and everything like that. But basically, we were switching it from kind of one bidding algorithm to the next, and we were kind of taking it to the next level in terms of upgrading the ability of the campaign to perform long term and optimize the way we want it to. However, where the breakdown happened was, we had discussed the idea of changing the campaign, but we did not get into the details of where do we want the campaign to kind of land in terms of a return to start. A lot of the times, for those who are not so familiar with paid media, the way that these campaigns work is when you change the algorithm and you change the way that the campaign has been learning for a long time, it has to take time to relearn. And so if your campaign's doing a 10x return on ad spend, and then you change the way it's going to return and you tell it to go for a 10x off the bat, it's not going to work. It's going to not deliver, because it's basically going to say, we have had no time to learn to get it from 2x to 10. The problem, however, is we did a great job explaining that to the contractor. What we did not say is how low you should go in terms of, the other direction. How much wiggle room should we give the campaign? And so, this is a campaign that was typically doing over 10x on a daily basis. It, had been running for a couple of years. And I think she turned it down to like 2.5x, and so it crashed it pretty hard for a little while. But, we turned it back up and we got it kind of the support it needed. And we basically sat with her and said, okay, what do the next 14 days need to look like in order for this to get, kind of, we've come down to here. How do we get it back up to here in the next 14 days? What do we need to do daily, bi-weekly, whatever. And it's great. We're above 10x again, and the campaign is scaling above where it was in the past. So to your point, it was a total breakdown of communication on my end because I did not really explain or document, Zach, kind of what our standard procedure is for making this kind of a campaign change. So you can believe the next time that we kind of shop that out, we will have those specifics more nailed down. But
yeah, as you add people, the analogy I like to use sometimes is like, imagine you're the leader of your company. You're sort of assembling this pipe structure on a wall that's trying to connect the customer, which is like a big giant tank of water, to a bucket at the very bottom, the profit bucket. And I think this may have actually come from you at one point too, Zach, with like a profit bucket and all the things. But like once you start rolling water down through that pipe system, you've made your best guesses, but you're going to have holes that come up. And that's really what we're talking about today is like, as an operational leader or whoever you have in your organization focusing on that, like you as a team have to be able to look at that and say, hey, my dad used to, actually, I've got another story. My dad is an Air Force guy, old school South Georgia guy. He used to give me hell for all the problems that we had in the restaurant on a daily basis. And it's a restaurant. We had innumerable problems. Like the bathroom was stopped up to like, there's a hole in a wall here and it sort of looks funky. And what the analogy I ended up telling him was like, look, we're on a boat. Like there's holes everywhere and the boat is sinking and we are trying to bail water, patch holes. And like, this is an underfunded boat that we launched the dock with. So like, there's going to be holes in it. That was the thing we signed up for. And I was like, but as leaders, we have to make a choice to say, I'm okay temporarily living with that hole or that particular set of holes so that we can triage the patient, triage the boat, whatever analogy, we've mixed them all up now. But like basically prioritize and execute and go get the right things done in the right order. And I don't know, you'll never get it right. You never get it perfect. And so just stay flexible and always be adaptable, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we do within Path for Growth for our own team members and that we teach folks to do is for your roles for team members, each role has a success statement or has success statements, the outcomes that you want to produce, but they're also ranked. And so if the first success statement is red, but everything else is green, that person has not prioritized and executed what's most important, so to speak. And so you got to let things burn. Something's burning. It's better to do that intentionally and say, okay, I know that's burning over there. I'm going to let that burn because I got something more important to focus on. That's great. If you don't know what's burning and you just have blinders on and you're just focused on something, then you're not gauging its relevance or importance in respect to everything else that's happening. And so it's important to know, like, okay, I'm in the restaurant business. The toilet doesn't work, but that's okay because people don't come here for the toilet. People might have a bad experience with the toilet and that sucks. But if they have a bad experience with the sandwich, like that's going to be way worse.
Yeah, everybody will forgive a toilet. Nobody forgives a bad sandwich.
Yeah.
That's our new pitch every time we talk to a restaurant group to do their marketing, Austin. Like, hey, we're going to help you accentuate the sandwich and not the bad toilet situation because no restaurant has nice toilets.
Gosh. Yeah, not many of them.
All right, Zach. So we ask everybody this question. If Austin and I were magic and wealthy beyond our means and decided to be generous one day and we were going to write a check with we didn't want it back. This is really a bad example, but if we could 10x your budget for operational efficiency, what would you spend it on at Path for Growth to make you guys even more operationally efficient?
I don't know. I don't know that I would spend money. The hard part is that it takes time. And so I actually had a conversation with a client this morning about kind of this exact thing. And they were asking, like, what tool can we use to get this to happen? And one of the things that they were saying was, we're going to hire someone to own the documentation of the processes, so that everyone else doesn't have to do it because they're working. We just need someone to like own the documentation of the processes. And that scares the heck out of me, because then the person doing the work doesn't know the standard. They don't own the standard. If you're going to do the work, you need to own the standard and be familiar enough with it that you can say, like, okay, this needs to be improved. This needs to be updated. Or I'm going to intentionally make an exception to the standard. Not let me go ask mom and dad, for permission, so to speak. Which that's what this role would become if that's what they invested into. So, if I had an unlimited budget, the two main things that come to mind for me are actually the main thing, and then two principles outside of it, is make work visible. That's really, really easy to do with a physical product or a physical business, like a restaurant or a manufacturing plant, distributor, warehouse, whatever. It's really easy to do that because your product is visible. But in the digital world, it's harder. And so make your work visible in some sort of project management system. Anything that you're doing, the results that you're trying to accomplish, put it somewhere so that you can see, okay, is that actively being worked on, or is it not? Don't let it live in your brain. Don't let it live in a sticky note. Make it visible so the whole organization can see it. Even if they're not working on it, it needs to be visible. An example of this was another client of Path for Growth was they have an HR department who's kind of doing like recruiting for their company. And then they also have a shipping department who takes care of boxes and stuff like that. And the analogy that they made, which was so good, was if the shipping department had just like stacks of boxes in their inbound and the receiving end of the warehouse, people would walk in and be like, what's going on? Like, have you not processed this? What's going on here? It's visible. There's obviously a problem going on. And their HR team, their recruiting team, had like hundreds and hundreds of applications that they haven't processed and it's just been delayed, but it's not visible. And so no one feels the pain point of saying, where, like, is that being processed? And so the big part is that, like, make your work visible, and that could require some sort of investment of financially for finding a system that works for you and your team.
Yeah, I mean, labor is
that's a great example.
Money. It costs money to invest in labor, and you might be, if depending on the job, if it's an hourly thing, you might be double scheduling, or you might be paying your office workers overtime. I mean, you could definitely spend money to go from lacking organizational standardization to all of a sudden creating it. And there's some tech stuff. Like, I think we use Asana for our project management stuff. And I know you recommend Trainual all the time for a way to like document processes.
Yeah, we use both of those things
too. Yeah.
That's where Trainual is where we document our standards, and then Asana is where we execute our standards.
It's making your work visible is something that
it's critical.
Yeah. I would say me and Austin made the mistake of not doing that until maybe 6 weeks ago. Like, it was pretty run and gun for the first year.
It was a full year of us. Yeah. Zach, this will just make you cringe, so get ready. I mean, really, for 12 months, I think I operated all of our standards, so to speak, out of an iPhone Apple Note. And it was kind of funny because over time, there are different categories in this note that, they've got dates. Some of them don't have dates. Some of them have stars by them if, they're blocked or something. It's just turned into this crazy system. And I started to realize that I think I was building an Asana-like tool in Apple Notes that no one but me could use. And,
very effective.
Chandler and of course, and Chandler and I, we think all the time, how are we scaling our business? How are we making things easier on ourselves to grow healthfully, in order to not tank our relationships, our mental stress from, I mean, at least we had it written down, right? I mean, I remember the point at which I created that little stupid iPhone note system, and I remember feeling so free because for the first time God knows how long, all of my tasks were at least listed. And so that got us through year one somehow. I don't know how, but since then Asana has literally changed the whole game for us, because suddenly, Chandler can jump on, and like you said, he now knows how deep my workload is. So he knows if, today would be a good day for a meeting or not. We don't have to have a 30-minute conversation about workflow or whatever for him to schedule 30 minutes of my time. And vice versa. If I have a question or a blocker on a task, it's very easy for me to tag Chandler or to tag whoever on my team to just talk through the issue. Whereas previously, any context for that task,
Right.
it all lived up here. And so if I need to shop that out, it probably would really take 30 minutes for me to type an email that says what I need done, instead of, today when you make the ticket, you add the context and the description, and boom, anyone can pick that up and run with it. So, wow. I mean, your example of making the work visible with the 10x budget, kind of by whatever means, because obviously you've got unlimited money there. I think that's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
I mean, it made such a big difference for us recently that really hits home.
Something else you said there made me think. We had Angie Moss on the show a few weeks back, and she is a sales coach for Southwestern, and she's part of her coaching is really helping people that run sales teams learn how to operationally become more efficient. And she said one of the issues people have is delegation, and her rule of thumb was that it's going to take you 30 times the amount of time it takes you to do the task to delegate it effectively. And so basically, if it's like a 10-minute task, multiply that by 30, and that's how long it's going to take you to actually get that thing off of your plate, and providing results the way you wanted those results provided. Now, I think it's a good model to understand like how hard it is to delegate. I don't know if the numbers really matter about being hard and fast rules, but the thing I think we can combine with these two episodes is, if you have a great system like Zach's mentioning, like written down and documented, and it's already there, you can delegate tasks much easier if they have a system. But if you have to reinvent the wheel every time you delegate the same thing over and over again just because somebody left your organization, and spoiler alert, they are going to leave your organization. At some point, They will leave. I don't care how great your organization is. They will leave. You're going to have to reinvent the wheel. So you might as well document it once. And then that way, when you have new jobs come up, you just only have to create new systems for the new jobs and not the ones that you've been doing for 10 freaking years, So that's good. Well, Zach, you'll be proud of us. We have a operational flow here in the podcast. We have a system and we have a standard for excellence. And I will tell you this, after every 10X question comes the high beam marketing ad read. And so that's what's going to happen right now. So if you are listening to this and you need help with your marketing, look, the recession is here. Everybody's freaking out about it. You're probably drawing down on your advertising budget. And I'm going to tell you that is a terrible, terrible idea. Every client we see right now, their ads are getting cheaper because the volume's going down. This is the time to double down if you have the financial position to do it. If you need help with marketing and you don't do that stuff in-house, go to highbeammarketing.com, fill out the lead form, and we'll schedule a discovery call with you and see what your business is all about. And then we're going to look at your operations and your efficiency, like Zach's talking about here, and we're going to see how we can fix that from the marketing angle. So that's what we do. That's what we specialize in, and that's high beam marketing. So Austin, you and I were talking a little bit beforehand, and I was telling you about the adventures of Zach living in an RV in a field somewhere, basically trying to build his dream house. And you had a question about that.
Well, yeah, like we kind of referred to earlier, all three of us have a baby in the house, about a year or younger. My son turns a year in 5 days. And so I know just how chaotic that is. Even inside of a home that's, in a neighborhood, we've got electrical, wiring. We don't have to have special executives from the internet company to get good internet. So I just want to know, obviously you are in a C-suite position at a, growing startup. You are a dad, a husband, you got a baby and a wife at home to take care of. How are you managing doing all of that from, the temporary space in the RV or in the barn while you're working? How is that going? Tell me about it. And then I'd love to hear, like, if you've got like one funny story of kind of how that, during this period of time, I would love to hear that too.
Yeah. It's going well. It's going really well. It's funny. We joke about living in an RV right now, but there's this really nice barn that we get to utilize, which is also where my in-laws live. And so it's where my office is. It's where our laundry is. We have a
Nice.
we have a full bathroom in it. It's super super nice. It's like the bougie RV living. Our RV is like
Okay.
connected to the sewer, like the city sewer. We're good to
Yeah, you
go.
got the whole system set up.
Oh yeah, we are squared away when it comes to RV life. Yeah, it's going really really well. You know what's funny is as we're working through the process of building a house, um, and we're doing it really without a general contractor. We're kind of doing it on our own.
Hmm.
We're working with some local builders, a part of Amish communities, and
Oh wow.
different folks like that. And so what's fun is really to kind of think about this as like a capital expenditure project, and thinking about like how are we lining up the supply chain, so to speak, to accomplish this result that we want, which is a house. And so the construction part of things has been fun to dabble into and think about,
For
just like
sure.
timelines between vendors and lining those things up and setting standards for what we want to be true and what we don't want to be true. Um, it's been an
Yeah,
interesting project so
the
far.
operational mindset's coming out there. I don't know that I've heard, when I talk to people who have built homes, I don't know that the operational timeline between, like the builders and the vendors and all that. I don't know that that's usually people's favorite parts, but hey, I'm not here to judge, we're just here to ask questions. So,
Yeah,
um, we
I
we
did
hope you
enjoy.
we hope that goes well for you.
yeah,
I did enjoy. Zach and I have been friends a long time, so we're connected on LinkedIn. And you shared that picture of your wife's what operational excellence looks like when it comes to cleaning up the kitchen area in there. And
yeah. Uh-huh.
I think it's a point to
I
that
need to see
anything
that.
can be made effective operationally, right?
That's right. Yeah. She just to like double down on that example, my wife Taylor was just saying like, "Hey, I'd really like um this outcome in the kitchen." She didn't say it like that. I'm just
Yeah.
translating it into business speak almost. But she's like, "Here's what I want the kitchen to look like at the end of the night before we go to bed. Dishes are put away, all dishes are cleaned, the counters wiped down, um the glass on the windows are wiped clean and different things like that, like, but she just bulleted all these things are this is cleaned, this is emptied, this is set, prepared, staged, whatever. And then we can always just look at it. It's like a different form of a checklist. Rather than giving me tasks and actions to complete, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, is that result true? If that result isn't true, how can I figure out how to
Mhm.
make it true?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like there's a pretty cut and clean, no pun intended, cut and clean list there of kind of, yeah, what could be the thing that's wrong. So it probably makes it pretty easy on you.
I know, Austin. That was definitely pun intended. I tell you what, I'm having questions pop up in my head about checklist and the efficiency of flying planes with check. I mean, I could talk to Zach about this operational stuff all day, and we might have to bring you back for a part two. We'll definitely bring you back at some point, and we'll go further
Yeah,
into
this
this
is great.
because operations, like you said in the beginning, is a very broad bucket, and so you could have a PhD in operations very easily.
Oof.
So. We appreciate everybody listening. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show. We will see
you.
you next week. Peace.